welcome to the podcast. I've known you for a few years, but a lot of the listeners won't know who you are. So, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and give a bit of background?
Yeah, I'm Zachary Ball. Been shooting for 16 years now. Yeah, 16. Yeah, I started when I was 6. I think that's 12 on me on the podcast to start with. Shot most stars over the years. Shot all forms of archery, target, field, 3D, bit of everything. Currently shoot compound. Do have a crossbow and a flat bow, which every now and then I play with. Yeah,
Cool. All right. So, you're mainly compound, aren't you?
yeah, mainly shoot
Unlimited. Oh,
full unlimited.
yeah. Then unlimited for that is I'm kind of caught between NFAS unlimited, but you also shoot internationally as well now.
Yeah. I shot for GB in September
Yeah.
on the
Okay.
3D squad.
Don't sell yourself short, mate. It's an achievement to get there. Don't sell yourself short. You've worked at that to get that far. I've seen your Instagram posts about working out at the gym and getting yourself fit as well for doing stuff. So
Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes with it in gym and mental practice as well as just physically getting behind the bow. It's more than you think it is when for people that don't know what it entails. Well, it's more than just what you see on the Sunday morning shoots.
and that's it. And do you think that helps doing different organizations?
Yes and no. It does help. Target helps with the shot aspect of it and not trying to overthink each of the arrows. But then again, because on target you generally shoot the same distance, you're not got the mental preparedness for distance judging or different lighting conditions and whatnot. So it's one of those, but both positives, negatives, but overall everything works in conjunction with each other.
Do you actually prefer shooting known distances or unknown distances?
I prefer the scores to get unknown, but I do enjoy unknown. It's the allow myself to get a bit more into it as such, and let the brain just try and work it out, and not think on the shot too much, and just try and make a good one.
Because that's the thing is like with NFAS, you're not around any rangefinders, though you are allowed binoculars currently, and that's largely thanks to your pushing them and developing that idea. But it's very much down to the yardage and working out where that dead ground is or what inclination you're at and what you need to allow for.
Yeah, trying to figure out your surroundings, and it's not always just a flat field straight in front of you.
And with you once you've set your sights, then that's it. Whilst in some ways, with myself being instinctive and no sights on the bow, it's kind of like it's what feels right. You've got to kind of get it right
Yeah, pretty much.
mechanically, for want of a better description.
Yeah, when I've set my sight and I've picked a distance, that's it. I'm stuck with it, and all I need to do is if I know I can make a perfect shot and the pin's nice and sat in the middle, I've got probably 3 or 4 yards where I can still hit the middle. But any more than that, you're looking it's 5 yards might be a high 16 or even a small target, or a long distance one straight over its back or under its belly.
And that's it. And 16, for those of you who are listening, 16 is a wound. So you've got, for your first arrows, you've got an inner kill, and a wound. And generally, if you're not in the inner kills or kills, you haven't got a hope of getting anywhere in your class.
Pretty much,
If,
you need on average about 35 out of 40 pro spots.
yeah, which is the 24s, the inner kills.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't. We could go down the route of the new NFAS target faces because I've just done a write up because Zach and I have talked to, so just so the listeners know about this, and NFAS have just produced a load of target faces, which are quite nice, and we've got some of the mesh ones because we haven't got the heavy usage of compounds blowing out the center, or we need ones that last for several weeks because we don't get access to the wood as often as we'd like. So we bought some of these mesh faces, so I did a review on them, and I think they're quite nice, but the problem being is if you're hitting the same spot again and again, they do get blown out just the same as the paper face do.
Yeah,
But
they're good for an overall average NFAS shooter, well, shooting course, should I say, where you've got a mixture of all styles. But as a compound archer myself, they're no good for me because I just end up blowing them out and they're 5-6 times the price of a plain paper one.
yeah, so there's I think that's something that's interesting when you're organising shoots, because you've been organising shoots and courses for years and setting courses for years.
Yeah,
There's a lot of costs that go into it that people don't realise.
It's ridiculous, especially at the moment, and everything price has gone up and everything. Food cost is just that's the main stinger to start with the shoot with. Before you even think about putting new pegs out or, like I say, paper faces, maybe even some new bosses. And just for one shoot, you might need to buy 3 or 4 more bosses, which and then you've got to wait 2 more shoots so you get money back for them.
Yep, I've just bought the foam and made our own bosses because I actually worked out that I managed to get 2 pallets worth, which is about 7.5 meters of foam
Yeah,
for 600 quid.
that's not bad.
And I had the wood, sufficient wood to make 4 of them straight off, and then the club's donated on bought wood for the other 2. So we've now got, or we will have shortly, because I've got 1 left to make, 6 1300 bosses for about £650, and I think they're retailing about £200 each at present.
Yeah, about 250 depending on which you get.
Yeah, and it's incredibly expensive for a club, and we haven't bought any more 3Ds. But the 3Ds prices are going through the roof. But you're mainly 3Ds now, aren't you?
Yeah, Woodend's which is my main club I shoot for in EFA and NFAS, and I do a lot of course laying there. We have 43 3Ds that we've spent years building up and whatnot.
Hmm.
And last year we brought 10 90-centimetre bosses. We've got enough to lay a full 40 course and full competition for NFAS, and obviously we did the 2 EFA ones this year.
Mm-hmm. But it is expensive. I don't think people realise that the cost of 3Ds, even the cost of paper faces, there's a lot that goes into it, and it's something that, from a course layer's perspective, you've got to start thinking about from almost day one. So, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you have done the different courses, you have done the EFA ones and the NFAS ones. It's sort of like pick your brains and hear your views on actually setting them and how you go about doing it and stuff like that. So, over to you. How do you start?
The way I first start, because Woodend's quite open. There's a few sets of trees, but it's basically a couple of fields. I get in bird's eye view off your Google Maps for it, mark out where everything's going, where the admin's going, where the car park is, and everything, and then go right. Which way around the land do I want to go? And I start visualizing where the shots are going to be. Mark them down on laminate the photograph, get a Sharpie out, just mark where I want 36 sites to go roughly, and then I can build from there and go right. This one could be this far. What type do I want on that distance? And then start to build it up before I even get onto the course, before I start even think about laying, putting a single peg in the floor, get an overhead view, get a plan for it, and then go from there.
I think that's helped by the fact that it's quite an open course, so therefore, or open ground, so that getting an aerial photograph helps a lot.
Yeah, I've done it a few times on a course I've made in the woods, and the easiest thing to do, like what 3 words or GPS stuff, I'm sure you've tried to do stuff like that before, haven't you? And it is useful, even if it's not an exact science for where the targets are going. You can get a rough layout of where the shots are going to be.
I've struggled using what 3 words is really useful for getting people to your site. I've struggled to use it for course laying, and that's because when we were doing this, we discovered what 3 words maps is like a 3-meter square block.
Yeah.
And we were doing this. We had 2 phones, and we were doing this, and we actually discovered that Rich, who was stood next to me, literally just a couple of feet away, was getting a different feed. Yes, from one what 3, and I was getting a different what 3 words. And then when what we realised was we happened to be on a corner of 4 squares, and he just literally goes, "Are you sure?" So I moved to the back of the boss. He moved to where the front of the boss would be. Yes, and we got another 2. So we were getting 4 off like within 3 foot of one another, and we were thinking, "What's going on?" So I've swapped to using a GPS one, which actually gives me a plotting direction as well, north, south, east, west, and that feeds OS Lite that I'm using now. And I tend to use that in the winter months when there's a lot less leaf color. I'll start again. A lot less leaves on the tree, so it doesn't affect the GPS. And I find that works really well, because obviously in tree cover you can struggle with GPS systems.
Yeah, so when I've played courses in woodland, I've I've just used the basic Google Maps because I haven't got all that technology, and what three words wasn't a thing at that point in time when I was doing them.
Yeah.
And I'd just get a vague idea of it. Go, right, oh, I'm pointing this way because I pretty much know the woodlands anyway. I'm one of those weird people that can remember courses from 10 years ago, so I can remember woodland just from walking through it once.
Yeah. No, I can understand that because I do the same thing. It's interesting because I tend to walk around a wood and spot where I like to have a shot in and then map it on. But I think what you're saying where wood end's concerned is because you know the land, it helps just you can literally start off with a map, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got a map in my head basically, and I just
Yeah.
put it onto a piece of paper. So anybody I'm working with, I can go, look, this is where it needs to be. So I'm not trying to describe it to people.
Is it a group activity or is it very much a case of you're the course layer or how?
Previous years, there's been 5 or 6 of us. This year, not many of us are shooting for wood end. So the EFA bowls at the start of the year, I pretty much did everything on my own from start to finish.
So
I had
that's
a few helping hands here, there, and everywhere. But from planning the course to bringing the course in on the Sunday night was pretty much all down to me.
so how many targets is that?
28.
Before? That's a lot of work.
Yeah,
Oh,
28 targets, and with EFA, you've got certain regulations for each of the target sizes.
hmm.
So you have to have so many in each group size. So I've literally got 4 or 5 pieces of A4 paper with different configurations of targets and distances that I could possibly use. And then I went round, laid 20 targets, and realised I've got 2 left. I needed to put somewhere else. So I had to go back and remove 2 targets. And it was, yeah, a lot of work.
I think that's sometimes lost by people because it's not just setting out the line of the shot, it's also how that impacts your route around and your overshoots.
Yeah, there's obviously only certain routes we can take through Wood End as well because it is basically a working farm with archery ranges, fishing, and kennels and whatnot. So there's only certain routes we can take round.
Mm-hmm.
So the targets have to be planned around the routes we could do, and then I had to figure out which targets go where and make sure none were crossing overshoots and blocking certain areas off. With it being so open, even if you go 100 yards behind the target, you can't really have anybody there because you can still see them, despite it being a substantial and feasible overshoot.
And I think that's an interesting point is that when you have open ground, you've got the thing of actually seeing people walking around. And though there's not an actual risk, there's a perceived risk, or because people can see somebody shooting and they think, oh, whilst in woodland, you can get lulled into a false sense of security because you don't see people moving around.
Yeah, I went shooting at the weekend at one of my local clubs, Leafer, and they've very, very nice course, to be fair, nice bit of land, quite a lot of woodland. And I was a member there, so I've been practicing there for all year pretty much. And I went in just before I went to Italy in September, and it was all high bushes, high bracken. Couldn't see anything around you. Went yesterday, and I can see 3 or 4 targets just because the bracken's that far down. You've gone from being thinking you're 300-400 yards away from a target to being 50 yards to the left of it, which obviously is perfectly fine. But because you can now see it, you've always got a little bit in your head of, oh, there's the target.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a perceived risk.
Yeah.
I remember at one of the 3D champs, you could hear a thud of the arrows going into the 3Ds, and it was off to one side of you.
Yeah.
But because you couldn't see it or hear it, that was almost more nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it's definitely like, where's that coming from?
Yeah, and you start, and then you hear one miss or you hear it clatter off. And this is one of the things I was going to say to you is you're setting mainly 3D courses.
Hmm.
Do you find that setting a 3D course makes you think more about overshoots and glance offs than setting
Yeah,
the paper faces?
definitely. Because on a paper face, you can put a small one, say like an Arctic wolf, on 90 centimeter boss. So you've got 40, 50 centimeters above the back of the target, which is just pure boss. You've got 20, 30 to the left and right, and again, lower than the target, you've got 20, 30 centimeters more boss. On a 3D, you've got none of that.
Mm.
So you've got more risk of a possible glance off and more, or just clear on going straight over the top into what could possibly be another overshoot for another target. So you've got to think about everything as opposed to going, oh, it's fine, the boss is there. You can get away with it a bit more. Whereas you
And I
can't on
think,
3D.
sorry, I interrupted you there. I was going to say it's also down to the styles of bows being shot, some of the poundage in some ways, or rather the styles and the arrows.
Yeah.
Because I found you tend to get more glance off with the bullet heads of the piles, whereas if you're using field tips, being primarily wood and arrow shooter, yeah, I'm using field tips, which is going quite a fine point.
Yep.
But a lot of the jazzes and the others that the entry level people might be using in the poundage of bows, if they're hitting a 3D and they're hitting a hard 3D, they'll glance off. And even the low
Yeah.
poundage bows struggle with some paper faces, I know, because at distances.
Yeah, the rounded points definitely do help the arrow glance off, whereas the pointy ones, like say the bullet points, there's even some of the field points with the pointy, with the very sharp ends on, help guide the arrow kind of into place.
So how do you go about what considerations do you put into the different types of field? Because you're field archers that will be coming to your shoots, because there will be compounds and crossbows and longbows and everything. Do you use wasp pegs, for example, or are you a fan of them? Or
Wasp pegs are great if they're used in the correct way. With wood end being so open, you're not going to get much from them because all you're going to do is put 4 or 5 more yards onto the target distance, which doesn't really affect us guys really, apart from adding 4 more yards onto the side. If you've got the woodlands, like I know your course has, and quite a lot of the field courses have, you can use the surrounding area. You can put it behind the bush, so you've got a bit more effectively dead ground, which might only be for 3 or 4 more yards on the red peg, but because you've got stuff in the way, it makes the hot shot harder and different. Whereas if I can stand there and go, well, the red peg's 2 yards in front of me, then it's basically just a slightly harder red peg.
so that's more down to how the terrain limits you, and also how
Yeah,
the course layers are actually thinking about it.
yeah. The wasp peg is dictated really by the area of which you've got. Because like I say, otherwise it's basically just adding 3 or 4 more yards onto a red peg. I've shot a few where it's been open and the wasp peg's been 20, 30 yards further behind, which yeah, it's made the shot a lot more difficult. But same again, you just add in 20, 30 yards onto my side. So it makes the error distance slightly big, but slightly more at the target end, but you're not making the shot more difficult to judge as such.
You do tend to see in NFAS, you'll see wooden arrow only shoots, but you don't tend to see kind of compound or bare bow only shoots. And
There's a lot more wooden arrow archers for a start. I know that. I know we've always been accused of being predominantly a compound course, but we are all compounders. We have shot the stuff before, and we do as well. But even at our shoots, the predominant members there that were coming were wooden arrow shooters. So, and you can lay a course for wooden arrow shooters that is quite challenging, that maybe some of the top compounders would find easy. Whereas the wooden arrows, if you had a compound only course, you wouldn't get as much attendance for them because there isn't as many people there. So that's the main issue.
the numbers have been increasing, certainly at the champs. I've seen that the numbers at the champs have been going up.
Yeah, slowly. I mean, we both remember days when there was 800 people at the 3Ds, full courses.
Yeah.
And obviously it dropped down to, I think it was 2 courses this year.
Yeah, it's 2 courses this year. Well, there's like the national championships used to be like 3 courses. I think I think it was Osmaston that I did my first 3Ds. The first time they were at Osmaston, and I think there were 3 courses then, but most of the time they used to be four full courses, and you'd have 2 wooden arrows or trad styles, so you'd have hunting tackles, longbows, flat bows on those, and then you'd have the compounds and the bare bowers on the other 2 courses, didn't you? It was A and B and X and Y, wasn't it?
Yeah, X and Y were the compound and carbon arrow courses, and A and B was the wooden arrow courses.
That's right. But it does take some thinking to still keep a shot challenging. And do you find that harder when you have got those mixed styles? Because I know I do.
It depends. Well, I've shot for many years. I've shot all sorts of styles, so I look at a target and figure out what's difficult for everybody on it. So I put a target out earlier this year. Nice big Reinhardt to Hogzilla. Big group 1, massive target, weighs a small ton. Put that out about 45 yards. Big target, fairly close distance. And everybody found it challenging because what I'd done is I'd literally put its backside in a bush. So you couldn't see the full size of the target, and it was hidden, so you couldn't get a full reference on it. You couldn't. It was on a narrow path, so you couldn't get the left or right on it to go to figure out the distance on it and whatnot. And everybody seemed to love it because you got the recurves with a big target, fairly close, and they're like, "Oh, it's nice. It's nice and not want to say easy, but there's more room for error for them." And the compounds who needed to be precise couldn't because they couldn't get the full target size, the full depth of it to get the distance bang on.
And I think that's an indication of your skills then, because I know we had a bison. We've got one of the NFAS Group 1 bison face, and I put that on a 1300 Boss. But because of the lay of the land at our shoot, excuse me, it's me coughing again, I didn't want to push it too far back. And from the wasp peg, it was only 37 yards. And we ended up having to put a net up at the back of it because there were so many people going over the top of it. Because they were seeing this big bot, and you couldn't see the bottom of the boss because you were slightly shooting across a hill, but there was a slight gradient up. So you had a lot of dead ground leading to it. And I spoke to a couple of the compound guys there, and one of them had a rangefinder, and after he shot, and he said, "You know, you've shot, yeah? Can I borrow your rangefinder because mine's in the car?" I said, "Yeah, okay." Ranged it, right. And I was talking to him about it. He said, "Oh, well, that's about 42 yards." And I went, "No, it's not. Here's your rangefinder. Try it yourself." And he went, "Oh, okay." And he went down there. You can see he was lucky. He just clipped the top of the kill line on it. But we ended up having to put a net up because of the number of people that were just going, "Oh, it's a big target, so it's got to be a long way away." And giving it some, and it's just arrows flying over the top. And that wasn't just the longbow guys, that was compounds of crossbow bolts and everything we found behind it. It was quite amazing.
But that's what you could do with the bosses as well. Like, obviously, 1300 is slightly bigger than what usual ones are. I think they do 900,000 and 1200 is the usual standard sizes. And if you're not sure what size boss it is, you can use that to trick people on the distances as well. Because if you think it's a meter square boss, but it's not, it's a 1200 square boss, then you're going to think it's closer than it actually is. There's ways of doing it, and like you say, with being with the dead ground in the little bit of the valley, there's ways of judging the distance to get it to be close enough. So to do something like that, I'd look at the flat plane for me to the target, any trees, anything in between me and the target to judge off, and then try and compare the size of the target that I know compared to the size of the boss, and use that to kind of gauge the distance on it.
And I think that's it. But this is why I wanted to talk to you. It's the aspect of when you come to course laying and you start thinking about things, you do have this kind of judging the distance. And if you've shot lots of courses, it helps you with course laying, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've got this course in your head. You've mapped it out on paper. You then go down to the wood. Do you immediately start then just staking out the shooting line, or do you stake them all out, or how do you go about that?
First, I get a load of probably 4-foot stakes, and I put where I'd want the targets to go. And I then try and look from all the targets and see what I can see and what I can't see, the line of them all, and go, right, so this one needs to go slightly left or slightly right because they overshoot wise. Where can I stand on the peg that doesn't mean they contradict each other or go across each other's paths? Compare, like one of the fields, we put 7 targets into it. Plenty of space, 7 targets. Like with it being all open, 7's the maximum, really. If it was woodland, you'd probably fit 8 or 10 in there. But because you can see everything, you have to be a little bit more wary of where you're looking and where you're facing, and the shooting lines as well. So in there, I put all 7 stakes out and go, right, if I stand here, am I clear of all the targets? Yep, I'll put a stake there for the red peg as such. And then I do that for all of them, and then walk down them and go, right, if I stand any point during this point in time, can I see them? Are they going to be in the way? And do that on every single target to try and limit any issues or concerns there might possibly be.
So would you have a rangefinder then, so that you then got to kind of like, or are you so good at distance judgment you don't need it?
I wish I was that good. Yeah, I do use a rangefinder for it. I get a rough idea of it, but I like to be dead precise on my distances or when I lay course and everything. So if there's anybody got any concerns about it and go, this is bang on this distance, Whilst with the EFAA being within certain tolerances, I can then go to whoever charted the course. This year it was Dave Underwood, who's El Presidente of EFAA. And I get in the whole list of distances going, this is what they are. See if you think they're right. Go around with your rangefinder and see if they're within tolerances, if they're okay, if they're not, if you think something slightly too far for what it should be, and go from there. So I do prefer to go around with a rangefinder and know exactly how far everything is. Then that way I can determine it as well. Because you've got a big target of 40 yards, but it looks further. Then you're, well, I don't need to put any ordnance on it to make it challenging because it already is.
It's interesting your comment about posts. We've got these 2 meter long. They're actually used for football training for dribbling. Yeah, but they're luminous posts, and we've got I think it's about 8 orange ones and 8 yellow ones. And what we do is we drop the red one in where the red peg's going to be, and the yellow one where the boss is going to be, and then move on to the next one. And because they're sort of like 2 meters tall, if you're doing this in a lot of undergrowth, you're still visible. But it means you can see the lines as you're doing it. And it's a very similar process to what you've just described. And it really helps when you're trying to map something in your head, because you're transferring from a piece of paper in your case, or you're transferring the idea of, okay, will this work? And you've got the line there. You can line yourself up.
Yeah, it allows you to visualize it all actually there as opposed to just in your head or on paper, which is always a lot better than just writing it down and whatnot. With being able to see it before you finalize it effectively, allows you to move it and change it as and when you need without having to move too much.
Yeah, you don't want to be moving 900 or 1300 bosses on your own, because done that a few times.
Yeah, it's not fun.
No, I've modified an old wheelbarrow now to actually be a carrier for. I can carry 2 900 bosses on the wheelbarrow. Just because getting them around the wood is an awful lot easier that way than.
But we have got back in trailer. It's great.
Now we've got arterial routes through that I can take my 4x4 through if I have to. But we've got, except for 2 areas which are woodland paths, we've actually got like hardcore paths going round. So if you had to get an emergency vehicle in, for example, we could get it quite far around the course to get somebody out. But likewise, it means that if we are moving things around, if we can get it to one of the harder, we can get one of the trolleys, or if worst case scenario, get one of the cars. But can't fit a 1300 boss inside the car, unfortunately.
Strap it to the roof, you'll be fine.
Yeah, do the old kind of routine of like breaking branches as you're driving out. But it's having a 4x4, or in your case a trailer or something like that, really makes a difference when you're doing a course.
Yeah, there's certain areas where you can't get the trailer too, so they have to carry bosses and 3Ds too. But I try and make sure they're the small ones, so I don't have to carry too much. Because they get heavy after you've played 2 courses for 2 days.
So do you change between the 2 courses, the course between the 2 days, or do you?
Yeah, on Saturday night I spent 3.5 hours moving targets, bosses, and pegs to make it effectively. I think I had 28 targets, moved 23 of them. I moved 26 3Ds, but 23 I moved total, including the pegs.
A lot of work, and I think that's lost on people, because when you're mapping it out, you've got to think, okay, well, I've got this here today, but tomorrow I want to have this. You need to think about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting gradually more and more croaky.
I got a map for the Saturday of what I did, and I wrote down everything I did, distance-wise, targets, and all that part. Then I sat down and spent about 2 hours going, right, I can move that target from there to there, to the same group size, and move this peg 3 yards forward, or move it to the right for 2 yards to make it a slightly different angle. Change the target and put it behind a tree so you can't see its back end or its front end. Just trying to tweak little things about it, so the distances aren't much different to what they were before. But because I've changed the target size, colour, perception of it, it makes the shot seem completely different to the day before.
So are you a fan of quartering 3Ds, or are you not a fan of quartering them?
I hate quarter 3Ds. Absolutely, with a passion. It absolutely drives me nuts.
So quartering a 3D, for those who don't realise, is when you're not presenting a flat side to the target.
It's not square on. Yeah, it's either course well towards you. Again, back onto the cost of course laying. A quartered 3D, if you're using, like we use Reinhardt's mostly with the replaceable inserts, you quarter them, you're not just going through the insert, you're going through the back of the target as well. And instead of spending 60 quid to replace the kill zone, you're spending 300 quid to replace the whole target.
And that's the scary thing, is that the Reinhardts are beautiful targets, and you probably get the money's worth back in the long run because you can replace the inserts.
Easily.
And I think that's part of a lot of the problems that course layers have now, is that people, if you put up when you're advertising your course, it's a mix of paper, 3Ds, 2Ds, and then there's another shoot that's on that saying, oh, it's all 3Ds. People will go to 3Ds, partly because they'll score better, because if they get a lucky leg, they'll feel better for it. But because it looks better. So but for a small club like ourselves, we've got 23 members, I think, and 4 of them are juniors. You've not got the income. We can only run 1 full shoot, NFAS shoot a year.
Yeah. We had lucky because of it being a business side of it, and Justin being an average shooter and has been shooting for many years, of helping us out with it. Because it's his own land, he didn't charge us for the first few years for renting it for the weekends. We did have the whole shoots on, so we could build up a substantial amount of targets. Which, to be fair, we brought some second hand from a few, fourth hand actually, from a few clubs, and they're 13, 14 years old, Reinhardt's, and they're still going. It's like the initial outlay is more, but you'll get 3 times the lifetime out of them.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And like I say with courses, I know personally, if I see something that says twice round 20 or a 36 or 40, I'll soon do 36 or 40. Yeah, like I say, some clubs can't afford to run 36, 40 target shoots with the targets they've got, which does put them at detriment, and so they can't get the people there to then afford to buy new targets. It is swings and roundabouts.
Well, it's like at the old wood that we had 30 targets out, and that would be near maximum to what we could accommodate in that wood to get round. With the wood we've got now, we're lucky we've got 36 out. We're going to be reworking some of those over the winter. So we'll keep a proportion, and we'll probably move about a quarter of them, and we'll move pegging for the others. And then it'll be a little bit fresher. We're also going to change the route around. But it's interesting you said about rental costs. Rental costs for woodland has gone through the roof for clubs.
It's ridiculous in places.
Yeah. You're looking at, some clubs are lucky there's a few £100, but we've got, ours isn't that high, but we don't have full access. We only got access usually 3 weekends in a month. We don't have access over any holiday periods or any bank holidays. So we've actually probably got 52 weeks in the year. Maybe we've got 50, 52 weeks in the year. You drop off at least 12 of those weeks, then you drop off the bank holidays. Yeah. So we won't be in the wood now until middle of January.
Yeah, so you've got 32 weeks out of the year, really, haven't you? Yeah.
So it's but other clubs that do have like 24/7 access have to pay through the nose. Leafer, for example, Leafer's got quite good access, but I know they're quite expensive.
Yeah, I know. That's the first club I joined Leafer was 16 years ago, and I know the rent on the woodland's gone up about 5-fold since then.
Yeah, and I think it is tough for clubs. We were lucky to get a lottery grant when we started, which got us about 25 bosses, I think, and a few 3Ds. And it's gradually kind of, okay, we've been, begged, borrowed bosses off of people. People have said, oh, well, yeah, I've got an old boss here you can have, you just need to rework it. And I've become a dab hand at rebuilding bosses, and I've done some work on 3Ds. But yeah, it is expensive, and it is something that from a course layer's point of view, you've got to start thinking about as well, because I know people say, oh, can we just move the pegs over? And I go, well, actually, then you're shooting across that boss, and that means you're going to be shooting that boss out a lot faster.
Yeah.
And you said, like, with the 3Ds, it's like you're suddenly going from shooting the 24s and the heart of the Reinhardt to suddenly, hang on, you're going to end up getting a lot damage around that target or skimmers off if it's set a further distance.
Yeah,
Obviously, you get the backs of them cut.
yeah, back some cut, or even on the inserts, if you're shooting at 45 degrees or 30 degrees, you're going to start tearing the front of the foam. And then if you do then shoot it square on, that foam's just going to come straight off and make a nice big hole in the middle of it.
So do you go about thinking, right, I need to include so many Group 1 targets, so many Group 4 targets for an NFAS course? I know you have to consider us for an ether, but do you go about it that way, or do you just say, right, this is where I want to put things and it'll be what it
When I
is?
lay NFAS course, I haven't done it in a few years. NFAS, the last one we did was before COVID. Yeah, we did the pre 3D shoot. I think it was the last one we did. And with it being the pre 3D champs, I wanted no two targets the same distance because when you go to courses and you've got 3 or 4 in the same distance in a row, you start to lose interest in it mentally. So that's the same again, that's the same again. So I try and make sure everything's completely different. Make sure I can move your sight between every single target, just because I know it annoys me when I have to move the sight every single time. Move it 10 yards. So like, yeah, do it again, up and down, up, down, up, down.
You see, that's interesting because I did a trick when we set a 3Ds course. I put 4 targets in and 3 of them were the same distance or within half a meter. But one was shooting through gaps in trees, so it had a corridor between trees. And another one you were shooting over a bank up onto another bank. And we put a 3D bear. You know the 3D standing leaning bear against the tree that you can get, the old one. I had that. Yeah, but I laid it down so it was actually going along the ground to the back of the tree, hid the head, and loads of people shot it thinking it was the big boar. You know the old yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And then I put a really short shot in of about 7 meters or 7-8 yards. Yeah, very angled down. And then another one in where you're shooting over bracken, but you've only got a window up between the bracken and the boughs to see this deer. And they were all either 22 or 23 yards. Sorry, 3 of those 4. And people were just completely fluffing it. Partly because I did what your trick was of hiding some of the animal, so they couldn't work out. Oh, it's a bear. Oh, yeah. And then quite a few people stepped back and they went, I still can't. I've shot it. I'm still not sure. And then suddenly just started to step back and they went, oh no. And they've ended up shooting in the backside because they thought that was where the kill was, because they thought that.
Yeah.
And then hiding the legs of deer is a great trick. If you hide the legs of the deer, then
yeah. We've got an old one where the legs detached from it.
So with the old plastic ones, the old plastic legs,
old plastic legs. I've put that out before on because we used to do a winter series of 3 shoots. So the second shoot, I put it with the legs in. This last one, take the leg off it. I'm like, it's miles away. All the arrows went over the top. It was great, thinking it was in a hole or something. It's like, nope, I've just put the legs off it.
Have you ever shot druids?
No, I haven't, unfortunately. I want to do a few more different ones this year.
Druids do a 2-day shoot, and in my opinion, it's probably the best 2-day shoot in the country that I've ever shot. And they did one, and I took my hat off to them. I thought, it's an open field, slightly rolling grass, standing tall bear. And I looked at that, and I thought, that looks really nice, right? The person in front of me shot it, dropped low, and they went, and they had a marshal there, went, no, and you could hear it hit something. I thought, okay, it's a bit clever. So I shot it, got just the 20, right? I thought, okay, happy with that. We went up to it, and what they'd done is they'd only put half the target out, and then stood it on top of 2 bosses. Yeah, so you had the 2 bosses lying flat, and half the target sat on it. And then the following day, what they did was they actually stood it up and moved it slightly over, so you still had all the grass, not where people had tramped it all down. And of course, people are going up, going, "Oh, I know this one," and they're all dropping short like mad because it actually is now this 6-foot-tall bear that's at a distance. And I thought that was a lovely little touch of course laying, where you really trick people. And the art is to trick people. It's not to punish them. Because I have a pet foible of having trees behind 3Ds. I hate having trees because the amount of arrows that will then go across and into the tree, and then damage the tree, damage your arrow, all result in hitting the tree and glancing off in a random direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a few times on the small targets I put trees behind the targets purely because of where they are in at wood end. There's a lake behind it, little pond, and they're only sub 15, 20 yard targets, and it's to stop the skipping off of the targets because of what's behind it with all the lakes and everything all being open. I'll put the tree probably 3 or 4 yards behind the target just as a safety thing more than anything. But I do agree with you when you put the targets back, put up to the trees. As a compounder, the amount of targets I've gone through and then hit the tree with, that's quite frustrating.
And I get annoyed because I spend a lot of time making my own wooden arrows, and people say, "Oh, wooden arrows, they're really cheap." It's like, well, actually, I've got a custom set of wooden arrows I've had made for me by Submarine. You're looking at £120 for a set of 12 arrows that are wooden arrows and spined and everything. And there's even the wooden arrows I make, I take a lot of time making them.
Yeah.
And there is that kind of thing of, oh, it's just a wooden arrow, it's a bit of doweling. And well, actually, no, it's not. It costs a bit more, bit of time,
Yeah.
a bit of effort. So,
That's the thing with wooden arrows. The initial cost might not be as much as the carbon arrows, but it would take me 45 minutes to do a dozen arrows, knock, point, fletched. Whereas for you guys with the wooden arrows, you're looking 3 hours easily from start to finish, aren't you?
and I wish it would be that quick because I'm very sadly anal. So I'll sit down and I'll weigh all the shafts, make sure they're straight, and then I'll put the pile on and then weigh them again, and then I'll work out, okay, this is gone, and then I'll cut and I'll put the knock on, and then I'll weigh them again, and then it's a case of, okay, then I'll batch it up and work out, okay, I need to put I always put a Danish oil on, and then I put the varnish on, and I'll say, okay, I'll need to put a couple more coats of varnish on that one just to bring it into the weight gap. So I've done a set of 24 hours for Sharon, and in those 24 hours, 21 of those 24 hours were within 3 grains of one another, and the other 3 were within 6 grains. So the entire batch of 24 hours were only 6 grains, and they were all wooden arrows. People have turned around and gone, like, that's kind of like that's really, and then like, yeah, I know it's probably it's a bit OTT, but it means you've got confidence in your equipment. You can just pick up
Yeah.
an arrow, and and the problem with wooden arrows, they do degrade over time because they get the heart shot out of them from just the constant impacts. Carbons, aluminiums don't have that much of a problem.
That's another one of those more behind the scenes you think there is as well in regards to building stuff. Like it's even building bosses or repairing 3Ds. It's not a quick 10-minute thing to reband a boss. It does take some time and generally quite a lot of fingernails when you finish ripping them off.
Yeah, we've got banding machines and ratchet straps and stuff like that, and I've made a little jig in the shed. So I've got a jig in the shed that I can drop 900s on. I can't do it with the 1300s because they're too big. But periodically we'll do a maintenance day, and what I tend to find is that if I take down 4 or 5 900 bosses, I'll end up with 4 usable out of 5 by the end of that.
Yeah.
Sort of strip the foam out, but it's quite useful now. You can buy just small cassettes of foam for about 4 inches of worth of foam, so if you just need to repack one bit,
Yeah.
so that keeps the cost down. But yeah, it is that thing. It's that maintenance thing of setting them up and stuff like that, and also the peripherals of like safety nets and stuff like that. And I get annoyed with nets going up. I don't like having to use nets unless I've really got to, and I hate the comment of people say, "Oh well, we're not sure about the shot, so we'll just put up a net." It's like, no, that's not what you should be doing if you don't
No,
like it.
it's not a solution to it. And most of the time, put the nets up that tight, arrow's going to go straight through it anyway.
Well, I'm shooting a 45-pound flat bow, and I shot a target. I can't remember which wood it was now, and it was about 40 yards, and my arrow just went clean through it because the net was so tight. Yeah, I missed the target obviously when I went clean through the net and found it another 15 yards behind.
Yeah,
And I'm
generally
not
that your
shooting
fletching's
a.
attached as well.
Well, I'm not shooting. It's 45-pound flat bow, 460-ish grain arrow. It's only going. I think mine comes out about 168 feet per second. Yeah. Your compound's going to be knocking on to 300 feet per second, shooting knitting needles, which
Yeah,
is
pretty
going to
much.
punch through, or punch through any net that's hung inappropriately.
Yeah, I used to shoot big 27 diameter arrows, and there was a few chances when, yeah, I'll admit I missed every now and then, and I missed this target by comfortably 10 yards, straight over the top, and the net didn't even stop it. It didn't even bat an eyelid, just passed straight through it, and I found it about 80 yards behind, because what the net had actually done is kick the arrow up a little bit, because it had caught on the fletchings.
Yeah, which it will do.
If you'd have folded it over and made it so it was loose, it took some of the impact out of it. But all they based on there is put like a piece of cardboard up, because it's nice and tight, no tension in it. Arrow goes straight, just passes straight through.
So we're talking about different experiences we've had. Where did your course laying start then? Or how did it start? Was it?
Well, pretty much since when I started shooting. I remember a Leaford to start with. I joined Hanson, and from a young age, Trev Barrington got me out laying courses, laying 3Ds. I was the young kid one time, so take this 3D, run that way 50 yards. So
Oh,
it
that young
started
fit
there.
kid, because I remember you when you.
Yeah, small and hyperactive. Here you go.
Yeah.
Here's a steak, run that way. Stop when I shout you. Yeah, that's where it all started. I was about 7 or 8, I think, at the time.
Mm.
And just from there, for the different clubs I've been with, different shooting people. Matt Hopewell, he's shot for years. He's laid courses. As I say, Trev's laid courses before. Martin Stubbs, Justin, they've all laid courses over the years, and they're very good courses, I'll say. And some of the best people that I've learnt off, well, some of the best people in fast to learn off to lay courses. So me and you've discussed many times on courses. We've both had, like since I was little, we've had conversations about targets and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I've learned from different people's experiences and all the people I spoke to over the years as what would be deemed as a good shot. And that's where it's all sprung from.
So if you could highlight, we've been talking about some common mistakes and things that people get wrong and stuff like that. If you had like one piece of advice you'd like people to think about when they're what would your top piece of advice or top 3 pieces of advice would be, do you think?
Top piece of advice is distance doesn't make it harder. Just because you put something down at 50 yards doesn't make it a hard shot. You can put something at 12 yards away and it'd be a lot harder if it's at 50 yards. Distance isn't the main key factor for making something challenging. That'd be the main piece of advice I give people.
I'm going to quote you for that at some point. I'm going to make sure of that because this is from a compound archer who is a very, very good compound archer. And I am so happy to hear you say that because you made a comment earlier about wasp pegs and just like moving them back a couple of yards doesn't make much of a difference. Yeah. And you are very right. And I think the problem being is with developments of technology, people do think, oh, well, we've got to make it harder, so let's move it back another 5 yards or 10 yards or whatever.
Yeah, it's to be fair, most of the targets I struggle on are sub 10 yards. Because if I'm a yard out there, I can shoot a 16 very easily. If I'm a yard out at 50, I'm still catching 24.
Yeah, you'd hate some of my wasp pegs because I put them with the juniors. So
I've shot for those pegs for years. It's fine.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how many compound guys don't have like a 5 or 6 yard marking for their setups. So you put a little dove or you put the ermine or something like that at 6 yards for them, and then all the red, white, and blue pegs are sort of like back at about 10. Then they're
Yeah,
suddenly like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm doing now.
I put one out at the Ether Belmonter's marked. This was a marked course. This was Mosquito at 38 degrees down at 35 feet. So you think it's 11 yards. Put your sight on 11 yards. No, everybody's going high on it, missing it over the top. It's 20-yard marks. What you put it on, you nail it all day of the week. It's not hard. It's there. It's just in front of you.
Yeah,
And that's what most people seem to struggle on. Even the wooden arrows, because they think, oh, it's just there, it's easy. They don't go through the whole routine of a normal shot.
yeah. They don't, and that's really something from a coaching perspective. You've got to go through that routine no matter what distance it is. It is that aspect of just because it's closer doesn't make it easier. Yeah.
Yep.
A longer shot tends to focus your brains far more, or you get complacency over the nearer shots.
I do that all the time. Oh, it's in 20 yards again. Oh, look, I've shot at 20. Damn it.
But that goes back to what you were saying about keeping it in your brain and keeping it in your head and that shot process and the mental preparations, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I find on the close ones you have to use more mental strength than physical, because you have to tell yourself, no, it's not easy just because it's closer. You have to still go through the same routine, the same process to get the same result out of it.
So, have you got any goals for next year? Or because it's like we're recording this on New Year's Eve for people who are listening, so New Year resolutions or New Year goals or
No, same year, same me. I want to shoot a few more paces next year. Paces I've been before, trying a bit further. I managed to make GB squad this year. I'm not going to go for it next year as such. Not going to go like I did this year, spend all my time trying to get it. I fell back in love with archery again, so I've lost a love for that. And I'm just going to go out and enjoy and shoot, and not so much go out to compete, but just go out and enjoy what I'm doing. Basically, like factory reset sort of thing. Back to basics, start again, and then hopefully jump into 2024 with the aspirations of going back with Team GB again.
It's very sensible because it's very easy if you get involved with doing a lot behind the scenes to lose that enjoyment of it, isn't it?
Yeah, when all your free time's going into how can I make my shots better, how can I do this, how can I do that, you start to lose. Because to me, it's always been a hobby, really. It's just been something I've enjoyed doing outside of work and outside of college and everything. And I've got into the love for it again, and I don't want to push it too far and get rid of that.
So no plans for any equipment changes or anything like that, or are you going to keep?
Well, I might change stuff. I don't know. Always tinkering here, there, and everywhere. Might buy another boat, to the 12 I've got.
Yeah. Just before we started recording this, we were having discussions about bows and how many bows we got. We decided you always need bow plus one, or bits plus one.
I've got 2 full setups, plus a few more bows in the loft that I haven't used in years. That I should probably get rid of, but yeah, I'll get around to it eventually. So I might buy another one to add to the collection. But it's just play it by ear, see what's exciting on the market, see what there is, go from there.
Do you think the bow technology and arrow developments, do you think that's still going to carry on the way it is? Because they seem to be getting, well, certainly arrows with carbons are getting lighter and faster, which is a bit of a interesting dynamic. I've been talking to a few people about it, but I don't know what from your perspective, this.
It is going forward slightly, not as quick as it has been. Over the last 10 years, it's been slowly getting better and better, but there's only so much you can do with it in certain aspects. Like the new PSE is going back to the old Dominator riser setup with the dual-handed ambidextrousness of them, where you can swap them over. So that's kind of in the past thinking, but also in the future as well for shops that want to change it left or right-handed, or people that want to try left or right-handed. People like me who decided during COVID that they'd swap hands and then had to buy all new equipment.
What prompted that then? Was it just?
I was suffering with quite severe target panic, and I'd got the injury in my shoulder. I'd lost all the love for archery, and when COVID hit, it was a last-ditch effort to continue shooting. So obviously I had to buy all new equipment and everything, because left-handed stuff is not suitable for right-handed. So new bows, new rests, new sights. Whereas like the dual-handed ones, just swap it straight over, same bow.
So what are you shooting now, left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed now.
You see, I'm right-handed, but occasionally I dabble shooting left-handed because I've got a couple left-handed bows, but primarily right-handed. But it is quite fun to actually do that once in a while. Just take your shoot opposite hand, because it makes you start thinking about things. It helps with course laying as well, actually. I got to sort of
ridiculously. The amount of times the left-handed archer was stood behind a tree.
I have a pet right with positioning of some junior pegs because of either they're behind a tree and the junior can't reach round, or the undergrowth that the adult can see above, the junior can't, and they're actually shooting through it.
Yeah. Obviously, starting at a young age, I started like what was the closest peg, the yellow peg. And there was quite a few times when it was at different angles as well to the adult pegs. So I was shooting across arrows. I have inadvertently broken a few people's arrows because of such angling on them. But yeah, my brother started when he was little, tiny, and he couldn't see half time of the bracken because they'd build them for kids that were 12, 13 years old or fully grown adults that could see over the top of them.
Yeah.
And not think of the little kids.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit sad because if you lose their interest, if they go off saddened, they don't want to come back. I shot with one junior out of champs, and they blanked 8 out of the first 13 targets because just the distances were such that the arrows weren't even either not getting there, or she had such difficulty actually seeing them. She was just, her comment was, "I'm just might as well throw them."
Yeah,
and it's
that's the thing. You need to think it's not just about the fully grown adults, the compounders. It's about everybody to the little kids. Now with the orange peg as well, you're getting some young ones under 9, and they're not shooting bows more than £10 on the little jelly bows, and they're the ones you want to encourage to keep into the sport and keep going and help it grow and move forward in the next 20, 30 years.
And I think NFAS is aging a bit poorly in that respect. I don't think you'd see that many juniors.
No, well, when I started, there was about 30 of us. I remember us all playing football at the champs, causing chaos, being kids. And I went to a shoot the other week, and I was the youngest one there. And I'm 22 now. And it's like I used to be in the middle of all the juniors, all the kids, and none of that lot shooting anymore. It's quite sad to think of, having grown up in the archery, how there's not many younger generations, not many young people than me coming through it and continuing to push it forward.
Yeah, I think it's certainly with the ones that we've hosted, you can count on one hand the number of juniors, and there's not that many small juniors. They sort of like the teens that may have tried it when they've gone to park, leisure park or somewhere like that, or they may have tried it at Scouts, and they'll stick around for a bit, and it's still quite an inexpensive hobby to get into.
Yeah,
and it's a good one for families to get into. But I think it is quite difficult in some ways. People don't stick around.
No, especially not in the field archery. I know there's quite a lot of juniors in the target side of it, but for field archery, especially 3D, there's not many. I mean, for both the Eva shoots this year, there was one junior, and we had 100 people time at them. And there was just one junior the entire over 2 weekends. Of course, I need you. I expect you to go out.
It's something that I think the society as a whole needs to look at, probably.
Yeah, ways to encourage the younger kids up. And it's always family orientated. NFAS has been. We started as a family of 4, and we shot for years as a family. I know they did the family trophy at the nationals. So they've always encouraged their family as such, but there hasn't been much of a push to help the young ones in recent years.
Yeah,
I've obviously seen that from when I was little and being the one on the other end of it, not seeing the encouragement of kids wanting to come into the sport. Just like I say, it's quite sad to think about.
Yeah. Right. Well, I was hoping to finish on a high note, and that's kind of a bit of a depressing note. So, go on then. Give us another quick tip before we finish because we've been yapping for about not quite an hour.
Oh, course laying tip.
Yeah. I'll put him on the spot now. We could see, yeah, we're recording this via Zoom, and he's sat there. I can see the mental daggers coming out, thinking, "Oh, drop to it." But we have known each other for a few years, so I'm not letting him off on this one.
No, I was the little kid at the time. Target size, kill size correlates more to the target than the actual physical target size.
Oh, yeah, good one on that. There's quite a few paper faces that look absolutely huge, and that they're absolutely tiny.
Yep.
And I think that's a good one. Do it for the kill size of the actual target that you're setting.
Yep, everyone's still aiming for the same bit of the little bit in the middle.
Yeah. I always should say it's only the diameter of your arrow. That's the bit you're worried about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have you got any plans then? Are you going out the new year, or are you going in a quiet one?
I'm gonna have a quiet one this year. Just try and just go into the new year and hopefully remember this new year.
Well, take care. Thanks very much for this. And no, well, it's good. I want to try and get the whole concept of course laying, or raise the concept of course laying a bit more, and put some material out there, because there's not a lot out there, in my opinion.
No,
You
there isn't,
take
to be fair, no.
you tend to learn from people, and you've been very lucky to learn some from very good people. But I don't think there's always that infrastructure
Not a lot
available.
of guidance, no.
No. So and it's interesting because, as you said, EFA's quite regulated. It says, okay, you've got to have so many of this distance, so many of this distance. Yeah. And where NFAS is concerned, it's more down to what the course layers feel, and any bias that they might have, or stuff like that, or
Yeah.
styles of shots. But anyway, have a great time. Take care of yourself. Yeah, just let me stop this recording now. Welcome to the podcast. You know, I've known you for a few years.